Normally, I really want you to listen to the advice that I peddle on this channel. But not today, no, because today we're talking about some writing advice that you should definitely not listen to. Wait, no, you should listen to the advice, but the advice is to not listen to this advice that you shouldn't listen to. So this advice you should listen to, but the advice we're talking about in this video you shouldn't listen to. Is anybody still listening? All right, first piece of advice that you should not listen to. Any advice about not writing mass market fiction or any general hoity-toityness about the genre or style that you choose to write in. There are some erudite, is that the word? Writers out there who get some kind of, I can only assume, sexual gratification out of disparaging those of us writing lowly genre fiction for the masses, as opposed to, I don't know, literary fiction or whatever. You'll see all kinds of hoity-toity writers bashing people writing genre fiction or hating on a specific genre because it's not highbrow enough for them. I don't know what motivates people to say stuff like this. Wait, no, I do know what motivates them to say stuff like this. Massive personal insecurity, deep-seated and suppressed inferiority complexes, and psychological projection. I think this idea that there is any fiction out there that is written for mass market, dumb readers is kind of a silly idea in the first place. Reading as an activity is progressively shifting further and further to the right of the bell curve of human intelligence. Even mass market, pulpy garbage fiction is usually read by people who are above average intelligence. Like, given the growing statistics on adult illiteracy and just the sheer number of people who don't read fiction at all, the general fiction reading market usually skews more towards the intelligent. And I don't say this to disparage people who don't read. This is just a correlation. It's not that smart people read. I think it's that reading makes you smarter. And this idea that there are these brainless masses of people who gobble up genre fiction, I don't think is accurate at all. This goes beyond the fact that you should be allowed to write the kind of fiction that you enjoy writing, whether it's a genre or a style. If you enjoy it and it brings you joy in some way and creative fulfillment to write whatever, then you should be allowed to write that without the judgment of other people. Don't let anyone discourage you from writing the genre or style that you enjoy writing because it offends their exquisite taste or whatever. Write what you want to write. Next up, any advice that circumvents your voice or style. This one is subtle and has a bit of nuance, which I guess is kind of the same thing as being subtle. A large part of how something should be written comes down to the style of the writer who's writing it. This is something that every writer develops as they write, as they practice, as they get more words under their belt. Your personal style, your voice, is a balance between personal preferences, your general approach to prose and plot and characters, things like words you like to use or potentially overuse, like subtle and nuance. I apparently say those two things way too often. What can happen sometimes is when someone critiques your writing, they will suggest changes that might improve the writing, but sometimes the changes they suggest is just changing something that fits their style at the expense of your style. Some critique partners are just like, here's how I would write this. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's just them implanting their own preferences onto your work by removing your style. You need to decipher whether something is an improvement or simply a different approach that accomplishes the same thing, but does it in someone else's voice other than yours. You have to be really careful with this because sometimes what you think is an element of your voice is actually something that detracts from your writing. There's a difference between poor quality writing and good quality writing and writing that is in your voice and not in your voice. You need to develop a voice that allows you to produce good quality writing that is in your style. Style and voice are sort of vague concepts that develop through time. You need to have a lot of practice before your voice will start coming through. It will evolve as you learn and progress as a writer. Input from other people can help in that process, but be mindful when those suggestions are stylistic and not quality improvements. Next piece of advice that you shouldn't listen to, trying to be realistic. This one mainly comes down to a really horrible choice of words when it comes to fiction. Fiction is by definition not real. And while there's something to be said for believability and making a story accurate and logical on some level, realism, making something realistic, is in and of itself not a virtue in storytelling. There's a lot of different dimensions to this. I do think if you're trying to do an accurate portrayal of something like living in New York City in the 1970s, or police crime scene procedures, or a balding person in their 30s trying online dating, if you're trying to replicate something real, then accuracy does matter. But this idea that making a story more realistic will make the story better is really not realistically how you write really good fiction. Fictional stories are 100% contrived. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but it's true. Stories are fabricated by the writer to create the kind of emotional experience that the writer wants to create in the story. These contrivances often disobey realistic expectations. When people say that a story wasn't realistic or they want it to be more realistic, they usually mean that they didn't connect with it. Maybe the characters are poorly developed, maybe you didn't accurately portray the setting, maybe there's something that they weren't able to suspend their disbelief for, maybe you made things too contrived and too coincidental. But realism as the axis to move along to improve your story, I don't think is a great thing to do. Next up, any advice about writing less, or even worse, not writing at all? Some people seem to be under the illusion that you can get better at something without actually doing that thing. That there is some kind of preparation or waiting around or learning that can happen before you actually engage in the activity that will make you better at the activity. There are people who will try to convince you that not taking an action is the best action to take. I guess because not taking an action is technically taking an action. I think we get this sort of backwards. People sometimes get this idea that you need to be prepared and ready to do a thing before you do the thing. When in actuality, doing the thing is what makes you capable of doing the thing. Potential is something that can only be measured in retrospect. Oftentimes, doing something is how you become capable of doing that thing. Writing is no exception. Taking on stuff that is beyond your capabilities is how you grow those capabilities. Some people sometimes give advice that makes people shy away from that, and that is advice that you shouldn't listen to. Speaking of not listening things, you're about to be not listening to me because I'm going to stop talking because we're at the end of this video. So there you have it. If there is any writing advice that you've listened to that you wish you hadn't listened to, please share it in the comments down below. I do listen to them, which is to say I read them because they are primarily a text-based mode of communication. Anyway, if you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.